Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. We got a good topic for you today, a little bit of a downtrodden one, but let's do it. Serious. What's something that emotionally or mentally broke you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I'm a nurse, and I've seen so many awful things, but for whatever reason, one that sticks with me and pops up in my memories often happened in nursing school. I was doing clinicals, student nurse working in hospital, and my patient's son had died in a car wreck the night before, and the family coming to tell him during my shift. When they arrived, I stepped out to give them privacy, but I heard his cry. The sound a parent makes when they're told their child is dead is something that will chill you to the bone. He also happened to be on telemetry, a heart monitor, and I was watching his rhythm when he got the news. He threw several PVCs, and I swear it was like watching his heart break. I was in therapy and was nervous about my child's upcoming birthday party because of serious anxiety issues. She told me to imagine the worst thing happening, and when the party is over, I would realize everything was okay. Day of birthday party, I received an out-of-state call from a coroner. My mom was found dead in her apartment. An investigation occurred, but it was determined she had a diabetic episode, hit her head on the kitchen counter, bled out, and died. An hour later, my friend arrived, hysterically crying, indicating she just got a call her mom died. I was numb and broken. Life has never been the same since. Filing my dad's bankruptcy, getting him diagnosed for early onset Alzheimer's dementia, and being his primary caregiver, it completely reverses the father-son role in a way I was not prepared for. Better now, but still is heartbreaking. Watching my grandma on my mom's side go through hospice, I've never seen a human slowly deteriorate like that. I was happy to think I would get to spend some time with her and comfort her because the year prior, my other grandma died unexpectedly and I never got to say goodbye. As each day went on, she slowly lost any ability to think or properly communicate to the point that it was like her mind was already gone. When she was close to death, she was making these gargling sounds that sounded like she was drowning. That sound alone is something I will never forget. It was the worst experience of death I've ever experienced. It was literally watching a person you loved just slowly fade away mentally. The amount of weight she lost in just those few days. Sorry for your loss for both grandmothers, and it's terrible, but hope things are doing a little bit better now. I could honestly give a lot of things that have effed me up, but I've bounced back from most of them. The one thing that broke me entirely last year was the death of my grandfather. He'd had a stroke around April 21. April 1st, 2022, he had to be rushed to the hospital. I dropped everything to go see him. I'd been pretty close with him growing up. My grandparents raised me and my sister, and he and I used to go to Gettysburg together a lot. He was in the hospital all of April with declining health. We would visit all the time. He developed sepsis, and we wanted to move him to hospice, but by the end of the month, even moving him would probably kill him. April 28th, it was my first week at a new job, and my aunt texted that we should all hurry over to the hospital because they didn't think there was much time. I left work and stayed at the hospital with my family all day. The nurses let us break COVID protocol and all stay in the room as long as we were quiet. We all had gowns, masks, and gloves anyway because he had sepsis. At that point, he was practically in a coma. We thought he would pass that day, but he didn't. And when it came time for me to leave, I knew it would be the last time I'd see him alive. I sobbed so much I almost threw up, and it was almost impossible to drag me out. The next day he was gone. The following week was the funeral and viewing. The viewing broke me too. I cried so much those days, especially when we had to close the casket for the funeral. We all left little things for him to be buried with: cherry chapstick, Guinness, and a little alligator plush I'd brought. I have the matching one. He always used to say, "See you later, alligator," and I would say, "After a while, crocodile." So now I always tell him, see you later, alligator, at his grave. And that's what I told him before he died, and before they buried him. April 29th this year will mark the first full year he's been gone. I've never handled death well, so it still hurts a lot. But he was in so much pain, and I know he went peacefully, and he's not suffering anymore. He believed in heaven, and that's where I hope he is. Not getting the proper medical attention I knew I needed, not feeling heard by medical professionals. I had a horrific case of food poisoning, Campylobacter, which is actually fairly common but presented abnormally in me. ER doctors and urgent care kept telling me I was probably just pregnant, which there was no way at the time for that to be possible. Begging for tests to be done, but being denied because I was probably pregnant. I couldn't eat or drink anything because I would immediately start cramping and faint. This went on for a week before I found an ER that did a CT scan and tests and discovered the bacteria. I thought I was dying. I was going through the beginnings of a divorce, unbeknownst to me. It was March 2020, and my birthday just happened to be on the day they announced the initial COVID lockdown. I got home late from work, and my wife at the time had done nothing for my birthday. I was in my 30s, didn't really celebrate anymore anyway, but no card, no gift, not even a mention of my birthday. And she'd eaten the last of my post-work meals, and of course, everything is shut down and closed early, so I go off trying to find a gas station for a protein bar. I'm not really that put out, it's par for the course. But I wake up early the next morning to take care of our 6-year-old. He's autistic, and emotional connection isn't always the highest on his priority list. But I'm in his room at 5 in the morning, and he says, "Daddy, it was your birthday yesterday. How come you didn't get any presents?" I made something up, and he asks, "Will you get any today?" I say, "Probably not, pal, but it's okay. Grown-ups don't really celebrate birthdays like kids do." He goes into his closet, gets all his construction paper, and starts taping it together. Then he starts wrapping up his own toys and arranges them in a pile of presents. He says, "This is for you, Daddy." And he and I opened up presents for my birthday. I don't remember a lot of my birthdays, but I remember this one. The end of a relationship for someone in that relationship sometimes can be very difficult, so sorry that it kind of came at you by surprise, but what a sweet sentiment from your child, and that's where you should focus your love and attention. Hope you're doing better. I was actively suicidal and had recently attempted suicide. I was sitting in my bed with my mother, and she looked me in the eyes and told me that she wasn't going to play my game anymore, and said that I was purposefully manipulating her and was hurting myself to hurt her. It absolutely destroyed me. I used to love my mother unconditionally. I thought she was the best mother ever, and that I could trust her no matter what. It was like she hung the moon and stars. My relationship with her has never been the same since she said that shit to me, and I don't think I can ever get over it. When I was 13 and told my family that I'd been AR'd by a grown man that had taken me and 2 other underage friends of mine to a motel to roofie us, my grandmother scowled at me with disgust as I sat there with my tail between my legs, feeling more shame than I'd ever felt. She told me I needed to learn how to keep my legs closed. I got a huge talking to from the adults and was punished and slut-shamed. I'm 31 now, and the thought of this still gives me a pain in my chest. 10 years ago, I was falsely arrested for a DUI. I was acquitted, but I lost everything in the processes. It wasn't just the arrest. It was the whole system and procedures along the way that broke me. I'd always defended cops and the judicial system, but you would never know unless you're pulled through it. First, after the arrest, I was fired. I was a bar manager for a huge HOA near Yosemite. I guess they thought of me as a liability, but when I asked why I was fired, they said, "We don't have to give you a reason." But I later found out that was the reason. Then I just watched my house foreclosed, my car stolen and destroyed, and everything else, storage auction, went away. By the time I was arraigned, it was all gone. I watched how the DA kept extending and prolonging the trial, saying he was still investigating while my court-appointed lawyer kept getting me to plea bargain. I had to show court every time, so all they were trying to do is get me to not show. Nobody cared if I was innocent. They just want their conviction percent to stay high. Anyway, I was found not guilty in 10 minutes by a jury. It took 5 years of my life, and no lawyer would call back when I wanted to sue. Cops are untouchable. I'm a whole different person since this occurred. I hate going anywhere. I don't trust anyone. I hate cops and courts, and I don't trust them keeping us safe anymore. It's just a business, that's all. Cops pull in the sales, and courts make sure they pay. Life in general. I've been through so much bullshit, people don't even believe me anymore. My father abused my mom, and when she ran away, he started beating me. I told the schools when I was 6, and they just turned around and told me and my dad everything I said. He told them I have a vivid imagination, and then proceeded to chuck me off of our roof of our house when, keep in mind, I was 6 years old. He hit me in the head with a metal bat when I was 9, shot me with a BB gun, tried to stab me, hit me in the head with beer bottles, and coming home from school to see him slouched over with a bottle of pills in his hand, thinking he was dead, wasn't fun either. Ultimately became homeless at 12 and worked at a McDonald's on night shift when I did school during the day from 12 to 18, then stayed at McDonald's until the beginning of 2020 when I finally got a tax job. I could never go to homeless shelters because if the cops find you, they just drop you off at the border of another state. I won't say which ones. I've seen it to many people I knew during my time on the street. Now I'm finally away from the worst parts of my life, but the trauma is even worse. I can't sleep, I can barely breathe. I have heart problems, and I'm sure I'm just one bad day away from going into a mental breakdown. I've seen murders, assaults, mutilations, and everything else. It's shown me the worst parts of humanity, and also the good parts are extremely few and far in between. Parasailing accident. Boat pulling us lost all electricity after a larger boat passed and it crashed hard over the wake. I was 800 feet in the air, attached to a steel contraption with my 2 kids on either side of me, with a mass of ropes above us leading to the parachute and sail. It created enough drag that the impact wasn't as horrific as it could have been, but plummeting hundreds of feet through the air into the ocean and then realizing the metal contraption is pulling you and your kids under. My son couldn't get on his back, so his life vest wasn't working properly. My daughter was screaming because her arm was tangled in the rope. My son was 7, she was 9. Coast Guard was called in for rescue. It was in 2020. I will never be the same person. I have flashbacks every day. Seeing my mom and dad fight every day and not divorcing. The most heartbreaking was when I saw my dad crying while my mom was screaming at him during an argument, and I had to intervene and hugged him and got him some water to make him stop crying. Wiping tears off my dad's face broke my heart that day, and then went to my mom to do the same. That was actually the first time I ever hugged my mom and my dad, and that was to stop them from arguing while both of them were crying on my shoulder. Sad. During another argument, when my mom went to sleep constantly crying, I woke up next day while she was praying loudly and still crying, and I touched her shoulder, and she freaked out and started acting like a mentally ill patient, screaming and crying and physically pushing us aside as if she was scared of us coming closer to her. I guess either she was exaggerating, she does that a lot, or she was actually deeply traumatized by that particular fight. My life is filled with even more traumatizing events, but these are the most recent ones. Sometimes, though a hard choice it may be, a marriage should end if it is the right thing for the family, because raising kids in that environment only may set them up for their own views at relationships and coupling to be warped by the negativity. I'm not a psychologist, so what do I know, right? I'm just a guy who had 2 parents. My last job in IT. I'd been working as a developer for nearly 25 years, pretty much since I left school. It had become very obvious to me over the last 10 years or so that what was expected of developers in terms of working hours was increasing. The reality is that despite all the recent tech layoffs, there's still a shortage of developers. because each one specializes in a different language or platform, etc. If a company needs a certain number of developers and can't fill those positions, then the next best thing is to demand your existing developers work longer hours and come in at weekends, etc. Of course, the pay is good, but what's the point of earning six figures a year when you don't get to put your kids to bed in the evening because you're working so late? The last few jobs I was in had that issue. The general expectation to work late with criticism and negative performance reviews if you refused. I jumped between different companies, hoping for something better, and I thought I had landed in a good one. It was a startup in the food ordering industry, and they seemed pretty cool at the start, but I quickly learned that they were terrible. The founders expected you to be in the office until at least 8 or 9 every night, and also expected you to answer any messages within minutes, even at nighttime and at weekends. What broke me, though, was being on holiday with my family and getting a message from one of the founders that the main website and product of the company has gone down. They had an absolutely terrible deployment policy and would deploy immediately when software was ready, rather than waiting till less busy days, which would be safer. They developed a new buggy version with no rollback script, and the whole thing came tumbling down. The founder demanded that absolutely everyone return to the office immediately. I told him I was on holiday, and his response was to say, if I didn't come back, I would be out of a job. I was tempted to refuse, but I'd only been in the job a few weeks, so I came back from my holiday early. When I got back to the office, I was told by the same guy that I should have stayed on holiday because I didn't have the skills to fix the problem, as it wasn't anything I had worked on. I quit, and while I didn't have a nervous breakdown, the whole thing affected me emotionally in a really bad way, and it took several months for me to get motivated again. I made the decision to get out of IT, and now I'm self-employed as a woodworker, carpenter.